Hello, this is Bunting, and today we will be exploring sound design and arrangement in the style of the experimental duo Shades. Let's go. Right, now Shades is one of the few artists I'll cover on this channel that actually benefits from my CPU crackling. So that's great news for us, right? But if you're hyped for the video, see me break down every sound step by step, please leave a like on the video because that would help me out a lot, as well as subscribing and hitting the bell icon so you get notified of any new tutorial drops, right? And if you have any suggestions for an artist or style for a future video, leave that in the comments, as well as any questions you have on this video, right? But let's get into it with the basics. And by the basics, I mean the drums, right? As per BPM, Shades sits usually between 120 to kind of 160 and above range. Just more or less around that range. Sometimes they get slow and stanky with it. Sometimes they get groovy, more half-timey. You know, just feel it out when you're working on your own arrangement. You know, don't force any BPM you're not feeling, whatever that means, right? But as for the actual drums themselves, Shades drums are particularly impressive and slappy, right? With super thumpy kicks and hard-hitting but kind of acoustic-y sounding snare. There's no doofy dubstep snares here, right? And something to get your drums hard-hitting, here's a quick tip for you. I like to throw on drum bus. I just turn down the drive, turn up the damp so it's not low pass, turn down this decay because it adds weird artifacts. But I take this transient knob, and you see it gives it so much more punch and shape on that snare, which I love, right? But if you're looking for some good samples that already have a lot of this processing on them and have that acoustic flavor as well, look no further than your boy, Bunting, me. Because I got these from the Waves pack, right? And everything site-wide is 40% off just for tonight and tomorrow. I am trying to move out soon, so every bit helps. And if you're looking for some banger samples, look, there's presets as well, all sorts of stuff as well as free stuff. Look no further because you get banger samples and you get to support your favorite tutorial creator, right? But that's that. But a quick note before I continue is that I have a Patreon as well, where if you want the presets I made in this video, see, preset right there, you can get that by supporting me, as well as the project file. This exact project file, everything I did in it, to make it your own or just learn from, deconstruct it. You know the deal, right? But that aside, okay, forget that. Setup time is over. Back to drums, right? Okay. For the drum beat, it's nothing crazy. Really nothing crazy. I think the processing is more important. But I'm always sure to make my drums and bass really interact. So as you see, this bass here, the note is changing when the kick hits, right? And there's just a lot of interaction, you know. This bass kicks in when this kick hits as well. You know, I think that's a huge upgrade in terms of groove compared to just, you know, laying stuff around, kind of ignoring each other, you know, having the kick and bass interact versus sitting, not interacting, right? But whatever that means, because up next, what you actually want to see, this crazy sound design, right? So let me turn off this little reverb. That's a big part of it as well. And you'll see that a lot of this sound, a lot of Shades, period, is profuse amounts of distortion, right? But before the distortion, it's good to have a nice basis to distort off of. And for that, we have our old friend, the sine wave, right? So as you see, what I did here, I just got a basic shape, right? Basic shape sine wave. And what I did for a bit of extra beef is I drew in this third harmonic here. Just gives it a bit more kind of girth in the end of the process, right? But besides that, right, you can use a sine wave, you can draw on whatever harmonics you want. It doesn't make a huge difference, but this harmonic series definitely does. So essentially what the harmonic series is if I click on this, you'll see that the harmonic series, it's kind of like a scale almost of sine waves, right? All these are sine waves just at different pitches. And just because, I don't know, life is magic, they all just sound good together, right? So whatever you lay it together will end up sounding pretty good. As is, it can be a good wub, is what I'm saying. But once you start pushing this stuff through some distortion, you hear all those harmonics coming out in a crazy gritty way. So life hack, lay your harmonics and push them through. Now, another thing that's happening right on here, of course, I have some pitch bend from this Vital pitch wheel, which I'll show you quickly how to do. You see this pitch wheel, and you can automate that within Ableton, as well as change how far it bends pitch, right, and steps. But beyond that, you'll see I have some other automations here, and that's on these levels. You see these knobs twisting around on their own like magic. And the reason I did that is because when you're pushing through distortion, just those levels, fluctuating those levels, really adds some movement. You know, you hear those harmonics peaking in and out. It sounds super sick. And if I turn it off, you can hear, yeah, that's pretty insane. And I have 2 different harmonics doing kind of similar movements just for that extra interest. You know, you can mess with different harmonics, different level automations, and most importantly, different distortions, which I'm going to get into in a minute. So a quick note on distortion, right? The fan favorite, right, and probably easiest to use is Ableton Set. But what is distortion actually doing? So if you look at the EQ, right, it's very bare bones. You see these 3 peaks from our 3 waves. What distortion does essentially introduces more harmonics, which is going to make your sound more fat and probably more interesting. Yeah. But there's all sorts of different types of distortion, right? So if we bring in amp, right, amp is kind of, it simulates a guitar amp, right? And it gives such a rich kind of low end with a gritty high end, and sounds freaking amazing. Now there's plenty of different settings on here, right? You can change it from the presets, lead, heavy, bass, for all different results. You can turn up the gain or turn it down, mess with the dry wet so it has a bit less grit subtly, right? But yeah, that's amp for you. It's super cool for these sounds, and I wouldn't be surprised if they personally used it. I just found it gave this great fat grit, right? So within this chain, I only wanted a bit of saturation, because too much, then it sounds kind of squarey, right? Because saturation, it kind of pushes the sound so much, it ends up becoming a square wave, right? I'll explain more on that in a bit, right? But yeah, just a few amps that are split up by this overdrive. Now, what is overdrive? So, saturator distorts stuff overall, amp distorts stuff similar to a guitar amp. What overdrive does is essentially distort stuff within a specific band of the sound. So this is probably the best for getting really surgical with your sound design, right? So as you see, I'm just shifting around essentially the EQ of where the sound applies, right? And beyond that, you can change where it applies to the whole thing or to a small part. And you can push up the drive, make it more slammed, push up the tone for a bit more kind of color and richness. And you can also mess with this dynamics knob for a similar effect, and the dry wet if you want all of it or none of it. Usually around 50% is the sweet spot, or else it kind of just gets EQ'd, you know, since this is kind of functioning as an EQ, a bandpass, right? But really, just messing with the orders of these effects and the amounts and every little knob will give you plenty of absolutely obese sounds to work with, right? And you'll see a pattern as I progress throughout all these different sounds. Yeah, shit gets crazy. But just because it wouldn't be a crazy foghorn without a bit of reverb, I use this Convolution Reverb, right? So this is a Max for Live plugin, right? So Ableton's reverb, it's alright, but it's really not the best. But lucky for you, within Ableton is another reverb, and I just use Convolution Reverb Pro, right? Basically what Convolution Reverb is, it essentially, through some magic technology, it simulates an environment. So essentially they play a little impulse through like a Rundle Nova or a stairwell, right? And they're able to get the echo response of it, like the reverb response, and that becomes available for your use. So yeah, that's freaking insane, whatever the heck is going on with that, right? But all you got to know really is you can select one that sounds good to you out of all these lovely presets, all these lovely impulse responses. And a lot of time you probably want to EQ out a bit of that low mid-range using this lovely EQ here. This is only in the Pro version. They're both free, so and you can mess with the dry wet to have it more or less washed out. I wanted that grit to come out, so I turned the dry wet pretty low, right? But yeah, that's that. Taking my time on this explanation, as you can probably tell, right? But that's a fat bass, plenty of variations to involve. And I'm going to freeze it so my CPU doesn't die any more than it already is. So our next bass in the sequence, right, is this stupid fat low-end bass. right? Which part of it is why it's so fat, because I'm just hitting a lower note, right? But beyond that, I said heck it to no distortion, right? And just slammed it with amps. As you can tell, amps are nutty, right? Love that for this type of sound, and I'm definitely going to abuse this in my own work, right? Abuse and use, reduce, recycle. But as you see in the Vital, right, we use a similar technique, just the harmonic series. Didn't end up showing through very much at all, right? You can turn the level up, but I thought at the time it added a slight amount of richness, right? But just like with the other patch, you can really mess with the harmonics as well as the distortions you use, right? And a quick note, I should have said this earlier, but if you're in FL Studio or in any other DAW, there's plenty of onboard distortions, right? It might not sound exactly the same as mine in Ableton, but you'll get very usable results, very gritty, very shadesy in the end, right? But one thing I added to the end, which kind of shows you how you can further push these sounds, is this saturator with the drive being automated. It's kind of hard to hear, but you hear this kind of woof, right? And that's that drive being boosted, right? So that just goes to show you, with some subtle automations, you can add just a slight layer of movement to your sounds, right? And you could do that with any dry wet, any knob you see. That's the beauty of it, you know, get crazy with it. One thing you won't notice too much is OTT in my sound design here. And that's because OTT is cool, but I feel like for this style of sound, it almost brightens it too much. Gets rid of that kind of like analog-y grit. I don't even know if that's the right word for it. But I really want that low end pushing through, kind of asymmetrical, while OTT just kind of squashes everything, flattens it out. Okay, that's just a quick note on OTT, but for sure that is on limits, right? Because you can do whatever you want with sound design and go foolish with it. So this right here, this kind of riffy bass, has a bit more going on in Vital, but as you see, the processing super similar. See, this OTT, I don't even know if I like it. I was just saying I don't like OTTs for this. But one thing I did add is this multiband dynamics preset. So basically what this is, it just kind of pushes the low end a bit, and yeah, it's just like kind of compression, right? I just like what it did to the sound, and I basically took this from my mastering rack, which you can get off my website, right? I think it's in the rack pack or like the mixing rack, something like that, right? But post-processing aside, that's boring, that's lame. What's going on in Vital? Not much, right? But a little bit, okay? And to show you just how much you can do, you don't even need a sine wave. Oh my gosh, Bunting is not using a sine wave, right? But that's okay, because we're still in the basic shape territory, which is all that matters in the grand scheme of things, right? So if you want a really gritty, less blown out sound, but with that like like that growl, whatever the frick that was. I'm saying that too much, right? But saw wave is for you. And within Vital, I just added a bit of multiband and some sauce, right? The multiband compression with the attack up and release down kind of adds an extra layer of brightness before all this processing. And this distortion is just another slammed layer, right? You can use any distortion you want, so I availed myself to the Vital distortion. Now, what's really getting funky though is this flanger, this patch here. So for whatever reason, it didn't ring out, but flangers could be cool for this sound design, and I think they use a bit of it. So basically, what a flanger is doing is, as you can hear, it's kind of just ringing out, right? It's almost like a delay, except it's super fast, super quick, and you can really pitch it well with this center knob. Yeah, that almost sounds like a bass you'd probably hear straight out of a Shade song, right? Just that flanger being abused with the feedback up and the center turned around. Right, one thing you could do, you can have the flanger positive, right? But you can crank the feedback back to flanger negative, which has a different tone. I think the harmonics are different. I'm not sure exactly how, but it's magic, okay? But one thing you want to do before messing with this is I like to turn the, what is it? Where is it? Yeah, the offset down, right? Because when the offset is up, it's stereo, which can also be very cool, but I like it mono since I have more control over what's going on. As well as you definitely want to turn this frequency down, because if it's not down, you see it's just an LFO, it's wobbling around. When you freeze it, it's not going anywhere unless you tell it to with the center knob, right? And you see I automated the center knob a bit for a bit of movement, as well as, except I messed it up in the end, unfortunately, this flanger, right? I started turning it from 0 into the negative, just so had that work. That's what I was going for, but I messed up the automation, unfortunately. But yeah, that goes to show the flanger is crazy, right? Especially when you push it through all these distortions. I really want to emphasize, you know, try putting stuff, once you have all these distortions, try putting stuff like in the middle of it, at the beginning of it. Just changing one little thing right at the beginning can really change your result. For example, let me add like a phaser at the beginning. And you see, just that alone is enough to really change the timbre of the sound. Yeah, go crazy with it, go stupid, and yeah, make cool sounds. Okay, so for this next, okay, don't know what happened, but for this next bass, okay, super gritty. If we go in Vital, you'll see our friend, the saw wave, right? Spoilers, it's a saw wave, if it ever freaking loads. Yeah, saw wave, a bit of distortion, right? But a new friend to the mix is this filter, right? And this kind of builds on that concept of adding things in before all the distortion, right? So if I go over to our distortion quickly, you see a lot of the same stuff. In fact, not that much really. It's just that saw wave already is super gritty, plus that tiny bit of amp and overdrive just knocks it out of the park. That's why basic shapes are goated, right? But what this filter is doing, I use this LFO to basically open the filter, and it's making that movement, right? And that little bit of resonance and movement on the filter is kind of giving it this subtle wow, right? So if we turn everything off, you'll hear a bit of wow. And that little bit of filter movement is enough to have a butterfly effect to the end of our line and just give us some really interesting movement, right? And you can really mess with any type of filter you want. Low passes are especially cool. Peaks are also probably good for this. Right, that's crazy, honestly. And mess with, yeah, just mess with all sorts of different filtering, right? And you can even put it, at the beginning or in the middle of all your effects using an auto filter with similar results. See? And even just like this, here you get that little bit of resonance in the middle adds a cool, like, whoa, like, vocal effect. Yeah. Filters crazy, filters goated. Filters plus basic shapes plus distortions, and you won't really need anything else for the rest of your life. Not even food, water, or shelter. Just the grind, right? And our final sound here is not much different. As you see, I took that filter movement trick to heart, had a few of them, and even got some rhythmic effect with this pluckiness, which is kind of subtle and hard to hear, but it's pretty cool. As you see my failed experiments with the overdrive, just sticking with the classic amp on the blues setting, right? But blues setting is not the only one. You can go crazy with any of them, right? And our old friend, the harmonic series, I find the harmonic series really rounds out the sound, makes it fuller, and kind of adds more tonality to it rather than it just sounding like a mess, right? And decided to add some Vital distortion for even more grit and some multiband compression for that kind of brightness, which is probably hard to hear under all the CPU crackling, right? But really, that's it. You know, a lot of the same stuff for this, but at the root, shade sound is a lot of distortion with some groovy riffs, right? If you want some groovy riffs, check out the theory tutorial I have on my channel, as well as the how to make drops that don't suck video, you know, or it's called something like that, yeah. But yeah, mess with distortion, mess with basic shapes, mess with different harmonics, and have a fun time with it. Really experiment, really go foolish with these sounds, and write some heavy-ass halftime bangers, right? Once again, on the website, everything's going to be 40% off for today and tomorrow if you want to support me and get banger samples. And if you want this project file, this one right here, as well as the presets, that's on my Patreon, right? Really appreciate all you guys, all your support. Be sure to cop the free packs, even if you don't have money and you're broke. We still love you, because I'm a little broke. I won't tell you that, but right. That besides, thank you so much for watching. You mean the world to me, guys. I don't know. That's it. Also, join the Discord. Link in the description if you want to hang out in Discord with a bunch of homies and chat and talk and shoot the shit. Whatever that shit is, you're gonna shoot it. Like, pow. Right? But I can't think of what else to say. Thanks again. Peace out, your boy Bunting. Bye.